Welcome back to the Bill and Doug Show with a very special guest, my favorite person on planet Earth, Audrey Snyder. How are you? It's great to have you here. Legendary Penn State writer and podcaster from the Nittany Dispatch joining us here on the Bill and Doug Show. Hi, Audrey.
I'm honored, Doug. This is what it takes. You know, we go from you forgetting to include me in your preseason poll a couple years ago to it took me losing my job this past year to you reminding me and we're saying, hey, Audrey, we need your ballot. And then to be, a little bit difficult, I took my time turning it in. I think I was probably your last preseason submission. And I'm going to be honest, Doug, I don't remember what I picked in the preseason. I think I probably went Ohio State 1, Penn State 2. But it's not going to matter because the Penn State part's already wrong. So happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah, I will say from where we thought this Ohio State-Penn State game was going to be this week, the only person involved in the game who still has the job they thought they were going to have for this game is Ryan Day. So congratulations to Ryan Day for surviving. The three of us and James Franklin were out on our tookuses. So here we are. And we're still
welcome back, guys.
It's great to be here. We are here to talk about this Ohio State-Penn State matchup. But first, Bill, we kind of want to get an update, don't we?
Yeah. Audrey, who's going to be Penn State's head coach next year?
Good question.
We're easing into it as we record this on October 29th, because that's the other part. When you fire your head coach in mid-October, I don't expect Penn State hires a head coach until late November, early December. That's I think the timeline, which also makes it weird because you need a coach that's good and relevant enough to have a 9-10 win season, but not good enough to make the playoff. Because if you make the playoff, then you're looking, late December. So I think Matt Rule could probably fit that description, maybe. Obviously, the link there is that he's super close with athletic director Pat Kraft. These guys are super tight buds. They've got houses diagonal from each other in Cape May, vacation together, all of that. So I think that is a really strong link. Obviously, Matt's a state college guy, so you've got the hometown thing. So I would expect that Nebraska is going to try to do everything they can to keep him. Maybe they try to throw a contract extension his way, right? As maybe that becomes the thing. But it's fascinating because obviously with Florida opening, then you have to see does Auburn end up coming open in the next few weeks? Florida State, certainly Mike Norvell didn't get a ringing endorsement because the trickle down effect on all those jobs is going to be crazy. I do not see Brian Kelly coming here. I do not see, for my own sanity as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see that. I do not see the Lane train coming here. I don't think Lane Kiffin's personality would be a match for this place at all. As one source told me, Lane Kiffin coming here would be entertaining for 6 months, but after that, not so much. So it's going to be interesting because that trickle-down effect of all those other jobs, I think you have the Florida candidate pool and then you have the Penn State candidate pool. And I don't think Eli Drinkwitz is in the same Penn State pool, but I think he's in the Florida pool, right? I think you're looking at different guys. Is a Matt Campbell maybe an intriguing option for a Penn State, right? Was that a satisfactory answer for you, Bill?
I suppose so. Yeah. I just think when it happened, it was slam dunk, Matt Rule, let's go, right? I feel that was the reaction, but as it's gone on, it seems maybe certainly still a possibility, but maybe not the slam dunk people thought it might be, right?
So the fan base has been interesting. So I had the distinct pleasure of watching the start of the fourth quarter of Nebraska, Minnesota a few weeks ago, and Nebraska's just getting taken to the woodshed. I had the distinct pleasure of watching the start of that fourth quarter at a Penn State alumni function with a bunch of alums. And the people there are saying, see that, Audrey? That's why we don't want Matt Rule. That right there. This is just like James Franklin. And then, as if I didn't have enough fun that evening, I watched the rest of the fourth quarter at Penn State's team hotel outside of Iowa City. And man, you talk about being down bad. You walk into there and it's the head coach was just fired that week. It's a lot of people face down at the bar, and then the game's on and you get some of the people saying, yeah, see Matt Rule, this is why we don't want you. Because obviously they're still upset about James. So
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so I think when you look at Rule's record in the big games, that's where fans have pause. But I also think the situations have been different, right? You understand the complexities at Temple. You understand the situation he was put in at Baylor. You understand trying to bring Nebraska back to where they are now. So I think Penn State's a different spot. Also, this is the first time the Penn State job has been opened under normal, non-sanctioned circumstances since 1966. So it's been a minute when you really kind of look at the profile of this job. And of course, in 66, they promoted from within and went from Rip Engel to Joe Paterno. So they're not going to be promoting from within this time. So there's that.
They could hire Paterno, though.
Stop. What are you doing?
Sorry.
What's this? We just drove the podcast into a wall. So, I mean, obviously, Bill and I have talked about the job, and we've thrown stuff around like we know 1% of what you know. But the other thing that we've been talking about with Ohio State and Penn State as we get ready for this game is the idea of whether Ohio State has sort of loomed over Penn State, and that James Franklin won once in 11 tries against Ohio State. And I've been intrigued by the idea of, like, obviously they're going to take a 2-year break from each other and not play each other. Could that somehow be a good thing for Penn State to not have to be thinking about Ohio State for 2 years? But I'm talking about it from the Ohio State perspective. Does Ohio State loom over Penn State in any way? Is it a standard that Penn State tries to strive for and fall short of? Like, is that a real thing you think from the Penn State perspective?
100%. And Penn State won't probably want to admit this, but here's what I will tell you. Penn State this offseason spent so much time looking into how they were going to beat Ohio State, right? And so much of that was, hey, Jim Knowles, welcome to our building. Tell us everything you know. And Knowles sat down with Drew Aller in the spring, because Aller told me this when I sat down with him in the summer. And Knowles said, hey, here was our scouting report. This is what we saw in you the last couple of years. And one of the comments that Aller made to me was that, you know, he was putting too much air under the football. And Knowles would say to the DBs, hey, if you get beat, don't worry about it, because the ball's going to hang in the air long enough that you'll be able to recover. So James Franklin had Jim Knowles sit down with this entire Penn State staff, and they rewatched last year's Penn State-Ohio State game. And there was this back and forth with Jim Knowles and Penn State offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki, in which it was, hey, Andy, why did you do this, right? And then Jim would say, well, here's why I called this. We did this way because we saw whatever, right? So there was this idea spread, and there was this belief that it's going to be different this year because we spent all this time doing our self-scouting, which one of my favorite coaching things is when they say, yes, we spent our bye week doing self-scouting about ourselves. I'm like, yeah, got it. But they did all of that in the offseason, and they did things similarly with Oregon in terms of, okay, you want to start looking ahead at these premier opponents. And I think that's part of what broke this team is when you put so much time and energy into Oregon and you lose in double overtime. And I still don't know what Penn State team showed up for that game, because for 3 quarters, it was bad Penn State and it was booing in the stadium. It was, you're down 17-3, but the defense looked good. Like Knowles' defense looked really good. And then the offense turns it on in the 4th quarter to force overtime. But at the end of the day, I mean, they were a 4th down stop away, Penn State, from winning that game in the first overtime. So then you go to the second overtime, of course, and bad Aller shows up with the pick. So I think when you put so much on those 2 games, your measuring stick games, and you fell short in the first one, I think that's where this started to unravel. But yeah, I mean, even from like different programming benchmarks, we'd hear a lot of, well, what does, again, things as simple as media access. Well, what does Ohio State do? And like Penn State, like they want to try to compare themselves to that. And like, I get it. You want to compare yourself to a national championship program and do what they do. But when you have one fluke win in the series, like it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We would invite anyone, if you're watching this, listening on a podcast, but like, subscribe, tell a friend about the Bill and Doug Show. We're so grateful to have Audrey Snyder here. We also would invite you to join, not to join, but to visit our friends at Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com. It's fall, and it's the perfect time because it's not like late in the fall. If you order something now, if you order a hoodie or a quarter zip or something like that, like you're going to get good use out of it now. So why don't you go check it out, Rhoback.com, check out their game day collection. and then use this code BAD20, BAD20. You'll get 20% off your first order. Because Bill, like if you wait too long, if it's November, you're not going to, you're not going to get as much use out of it. Like you're still in October here. Like go do it now, right? Landis, go do it now.
Yeah, you want it for the rest of the football season. You don't want to wait until the playoffs start because you don't know how long it's going to last, right? You got Ryan Day said you only get 12 guaranteed games in a season, right? Well, now you only got 5 left for Ohio State.
Right.
So go get your rollback gear.
5 guaranteed rollback Saturdays. All right, let's do a little ball talk here with Bill Landis and Audrey Snyder. I came up with kind of like 4 questions about this game because it is an interesting game. Actually, before we get to those questions, I want to double back on something you just said, Audrey, because Ryan Day was saying it this week. It's like, hey, before this season, you thought this was a matchup game. That's what he calls like close games where both teams are talented. And he said, well, like, why wouldn't you still think that? The only thing that's changed is the quarterback, right? Obviously, the head coach has changed, but like all the players that you scouted and were worried about, they're all still there. What you're talking about with the focus that Penn State put on Ohio State this offseason, do you think that could show up in a meaningful way for Penn State this week? That like for everything that's gone wrong, they've been thinking about the Buckeyes for months. Could they put their best foot forward in this game on Saturday in Columbus?
Maybe. I think that's the only. And I want to ask Terry Smith about that again Wednesday night after practice, because again, they spend so much time, all these studies, like, does any of that still matter? And the piece where I think you talk about the matchups, the other thing that changed for Penn State, and this might sound crazy because it's a linebacker and whatever, but Penn State lost linebacker Tony Rojas for the season, and they were paper thin at the position to begin with. And part of it was, hey, Jim Knowles, let's run this 4-2-5, and it'll help make up for some of our linebacking deficiencies. Well, they lost Rojas for the season, and after that, this defense has been exposed. And so I think that's the other part to this of like, they tried coming out with some interesting looks against Iowa to try and make up for it. And that's where you also like, because I go back to, well, is it Jim's defense? And it's complex, and players are going to defensive staff meetings trying to understand it, which is a whole other thing. Is it that, or is it they just didn't have enough talent, and here's this really good coordinator? So maybe, Doug, to your point, maybe this is what it takes for Penn State to come up for this game. But even the high-end talent on this roster hasn't been good enough in Big Ten play. Like your Deni Dennis Suttons, your Zane Durant's, your cornerback AJ Harris, like your guys who were supposed to be dudes, like your absolute studs, they've just looked average, So I think that's it too.
We're always intrigued by the dude count, Landis, right? That matters.
All the dudes.
Yeah. I was even looking like mockdraftdatabase.com, right? It's just a website. Like, I'm not saying it's like the gospel for who's good and who's not, but like in their top 100, I think there's 6 or 7 Penn State players, which is as many as Ohio State's played in all its other games combined so far this year. So it's like, you have to respect that there are dudes, but to Audrey's point, if they're not playing like dudes, then I guess you don't have to be as aware of it. But I'm still on alert for it. I think there's too much talent on Penn State's roster to just simply look past this team and look ahead to the rest of the season if you're Ohio State.
I mean, I think, Bill, we could see a couple splash plays maybe from some guys, right? Like maybe you get a Deni Dennis Sutton, somehow gets a strip sack or something like that. But it's bizarre. And I do think we probably will see this team set a record for most Penn State NFL draft picks in April. And then we'll all sit there and say, well, this is probably a team that I don't think they're going to win 6 games this year. It's like, I don't think they're going to be bowl eligible, spoiler alert. And so it's like, well, how did this happen?
Yeah. Wow. Okay. 4 ball questions. We'll ask them on both sides. I want to start with the run game for both teams because I just think they're interesting. Landis, I was just looking at some college football data stuff. I think Ohio State is 14th in rushing play success rate this season in the Big Ten, and they're 17th in rushing play explosiveness this season. You asked Ryan Day a question about Isaiah West this week and trying to get like more yards after contact. Like, where are you with this run game? What are you expecting to see from the Ohio State run game on Saturday? And do you think it could include more Isaiah West?
I think it needs to include more Isaiah West. Just looking at the numbers behind like yards after contact, missed tackles forced, like elusiveness ratings, or whatever, any way you can quantify, like, do you make guys miss or not? the two best guys on Ohio State's roster are Isaiah West and Bo Jackson, but the two true freshmen. There's practically none of that for CJ Donaldson. Some of that is because a decent amount of his carries come inside the 5-yard line, 10-yard line. So I think you do have to sort of account for that. But even still, we know he's probably getting tackled by the first guy that he sees. And James Peoples, who I thought might have that, just has not had much of that so far this year. And I don't think Ohio State's in a position to keep waiting around to see if that materializes when the two freshmen just seem to have it a little better right now. So, Ryan Day's thing is the run game has been good, not great, efficient, not explosive. I think that's mostly true, especially as you said, as he said on Tuesday, you start to account for the RPOs that are kind of baked into that. So they call a run, but they throw a pass, and that's that pass went for 6 yards. Ohio State charts it as a rushing play. You can twist it to make yourself feel a little bit better about how you're running the ball, but they got to find some explosion. They got to find ways to get runs to the second level. And then when they get to the second level, make a safety miss, make a corner miss. There's still too many of those guys making tackles. And that's what Isaiah West kind of brought to the table on a smaller workload against Wisconsin. I think it was only 9 carries, but a couple of them went for 10 plus yards. There were a couple where he even 6-yard runs where he made a guy miss in the hole or made a guy miss in the backfield. Ohio State has really just not gotten any of that from any of their running backs prior to that game. So Ryan Day was keeping it close to the vest on how the carries are going to be doled out, but I would imagine we see CJ Donaldson in his situation, short yardage, goal line kind of stuff. But then otherwise, Bo Jackson, who's hopefully healthier, coming off that little ankle thing he had against Illinois, and Isaiah West, who I think is emerging as a guy who looks like he could be kind of dangerous with the ball in his hands.
Bill, I think you were teeing it up. You were ready to say great, not yet elite. You were ready to mention that.
that would accurately describe Ohio State's rushing. Actually, that's not true. Great actually would not describe it. Good, not great. And then we can worry about great to elite.
Yeah. Audrey, I think you certainly could have argued before the season that Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton were the best running back combo in the country as we look at it now. Kaytron Allen is averaging 6.24 yards per carry and 87 rushing yards per game, and Nick Singleton is averaging 3.61 yards per carry and 39 rushing yards per game. I think, it had been a thing for a little earlier times this year, why isn't Kaytron Allen getting the ball more? But what is up with Nick Singleton, and has this run game for Penn State been anywhere close to as good as many people thought it would be?
No, the run game's been a letdown, and the Nick Singleton thing is fascinating. That's, in fact, Doug, you might have inspired me today when I was looking at the whole what broke Ohio State or what, did they break it? I might have to break this down and steal your idea with the ways in which this Penn State season went wrong. And Nick Singleton is part of that. And I think it speaks to two things. One, they went out and got a new position coach in Stan Drayton because Ja'Juan Seider left to go to Notre Dame. And the timing of that was also weird because both of these guys committed to come back. Penn State pushes really hard to keep Singleton. And both of these guys come back thinking Ja'Juan Seider, who recruited them, who they loved, is going to be their position coach. Then late in the game, Seider goes to Notre Dame. So Penn State goes out and gets Stan Drayton, who his record, he's done some really nice things, coached a lot of good backs.
Former Ohio State assistant.
Yes. Yep. So part of what maybe I'm going to have to, maybe he got in on the film sessions this year too. Do you remember anything from your time there, Stan? Anything that can help us? But one of the things that Drayton wanted to do was to help prepare Singleton for the next level and say, hey, rather than just reacting, we want you to read the defense, then react. And it was so obvious when you watch Nick Singleton, even in non-conference play, he was overthinking everything. And I asked James Franklin about it. I'm I think I might have framed it as hi, what's wrong with Nick Singleton? What's going on? And Franklin said, it's it's this overthinking and they're trying to almost get him out of his own head. And that still hasn't happened. And here we are with 5 games left. And Nick Singleton looks like a shell of himself. Kaytron Allen has been the better back. But James Franklin wouldn't commit to Kaytron Allen because one of, I think, the most telling quotes of Franklin's tenure is that, quote, I'm loyal to a fault. And so you do all this work to get Nick Singleton to come back. So you want to play him, but Kaytron's been your better back. And he's someone that they can build around. So Terry Smith got it right. They rode Kaytron Allen as much as they possibly could against Iowa. And I think that's what they'll do against Ohio State.
Okay.
So I think that's what they try to do.
Okay.
But watch,
right.
I say this, and Singleton will like rip off an 80-yard run and make me look like a fool.
I mean, he's still a good player. I
Yeah.
mean, like there's still something in there. It's hard, and Ohio State's been through this over the years at times with really good running backs who they start overthinking at times. I think Trevion Henderson went through it. I think J.K. Dobbins went through it his sophomore year, Bill. Like you can see it when it happens.
I think went through
Mike Weber, like it can be really hard to shake a guy out of that a little bit. All right, second question. Audrey, we understand what Penn State is and isn't, but like, is there an area where you think Penn State actually could have an edge in this game, some kind of matchup, or do you think something Penn State could do well on Saturday?
Well, this is going to be really bleak for any Penn State listeners. I think the edge here is that Penn State's been really good at blocking punts this year. Ooh. And it's bizarre that when I point to that as like that could be the thing. Because one, like that also means that they're forcing Ohio State to punt, which I don't have a lot of faith in that right now. But Denai Dennis Sutton has been the guy. And again, you talk about players that can change a game. He did it against UCLA. He did it also against Northwestern. And so in consecutive weeks, this guy blocked punts. Before James Franklin was fired, he said that the special teams have been the most consistent unit this year, which is really a telling remark when you think about it for your other two aspects of the game. So maybe like that's the area that you think about it, right? Like, in this series, you've had the Saquon Barkley moment, right? Like you've had some big special teams moments. Obviously, the blocked field goal, blocked field goal, the scoop and score. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's a blocked punt, but yeah, that's probably not reassuring for Penn State fans.
It's just one of those. It's funny. It's like Penn State saying their special teams is the best part, and that actually is probably a bad sign. And meanwhile, Landis, we've been talking about like what's wrong with Ohio State special teams all year, which is like, well, I guess if the offense and the defense are both working pretty well, then you can complain about these.
Everything's great.
Things. Yeah.
Imagine if Ohio State's best unit was special teams. What people would be saying?
My God. Yeah, that should make Ohio State fans feel good. Like your special teams being your biggest problem is a great sign. Embrace that. Bill, where do you think is the biggest edge for the Buckeyes in this?
There are a few ways you could go. I would say Ohio State's pass defense is just going to render Penn State one-dimensional. No one's really been able to throw it on Ohio State yet. And they've played like Washington has a good passing offense when it's clicking right. I even think Illinois has a pretty good passing offense. If you look at the production from that game, Illinois did put up like 240 yards, but like half of that was on its last two drives when the game was over. If not more than half of that. So they've just shut down everyone they've played trying to throw the ball. And it's a tough spot for Ethan Grunkemeyer and as a first year starter, second career start on the road in the place where you grew up against a team you loved, to have to play this defense. We've seen what Matt Patricia and his defense have done to young and experienced quarterbacks already this year. And I'd imagine we'll see a lot of the same in this game, and maybe even see Penn State, knowing that, really try to protect him and not even attempt to do much. I know Audrey, like Terry Smith was talking about throwing the ball more vertically, and I think even working in some new receivers. I thought his assessment of the transfer receivers that Penn State brought in was like pretty damning. But so maybe there's like some wrinkles there that I'm not anticipating enough that could make things different. But just generally the way Ohio State's defense has smothered people, you expect it to happen again in this game. But specifically with the way they've shut down the pass against a team that I just don't know that is equipped to really throw the ball right now, is where the biggest edge probably is.
Ethan Grunkemeyer from Olentangy High School, obviously in the Columbus suburbs. Audrey, is Grunkemeyer the offensive guy to watch for you in this game?
I think he has to be, just because it's like you're put in an absolutely difficult spot. I mean, I think Katron Allen's the guy that they have to ride to maybe have a shot. But again, I expect Ohio State's going to load the box. And, you talk about damning comments, Bill. The one that Terry Smith had after the Iowa game, where he came in the media room and he basically said, our special teams hasn't been good enough, because that night they weren't. Our offense we can't hit the intermediate throws. We can't hit the deep throws, and our defense can't get a stop. So, so I'm sitting there like literally that was my response to the media room, and I'm like, do I follow that up? Like, how do I? What do I ask?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's kind of like where they're at. So I'll go with the quarterback. Again, it's a great storyline because he's Ohio State fan. His mom played basketball at Ohio State. Like, never thought he'd be in this situation suiting up for Penn State. But yeah, it's like, good luck, kid. You gotta, and again, somebody has to help him out. That's the other thing. And that goes back to your point, Bill, with the receiving core. It's just not been, you go out, you get 3 transfers, and Devontae Ross has been the best one, the transfer from Troy. Kyron Hudson from USC has pretty much shown what he was at USC, which was like inconsistent with a flash here and there. And Trevor Pena is like the speed sweep kind of guy, better equipped to be a slot receiver. So it's kind of
I had him
like
second. I had him second on my preseason offensive player of the year ballot.
Ooh.
I thought that was a huge get. Like, we were.
No, is that I think, is that a vodka bottle behind you? Were you drinking that before while you did your ballot?
It's
we watched a lot of Syracuse football last year, Bill. Like, we were kind of all in on like the whole Syracuse thing. Like, I thought that was like maybe the get over the top move for Penn State. Is it that Sean Clifford was from Ohio, Drew Aller was from Ohio, Ethan Grunkemeyer is from Ohio? Is that coincidence that Penn State, this is the 3rd straight quarterback for Penn State from the state of Ohio? Or is that a plan because Ohio State often recruits out-of-state quarterbacks and Penn State is actually thinking to itself, hey, there's some good quarterbacks in that state we can go get?
I think maybe they should stop taking quarterbacks from Ohio. Maybe that's part of it. No,
I mean,
no, I do think there is something to that regionally. The other part is that because Grunkemeyer committed to Mike Yursich, and Yursich was the guy who got in early on Aller. So like Ohio guy. I think there was some of that. God, Clifford was here so long. I don't even remember who would have recruited him.
Okay.
Because John Donovan might have been John Donovan, who's James's first OC here. Yeah, I do think some of it is proximity and that you're able to get these guys up to campus quite a bit. And they've always felt like they kind of had the diamond in the rough with all of these guys, really. And, you know, here you are coming down the home stretch with Aller, and we've had this debate on the beat, which is not really great, when we're like, okay, one game, are you picking Sean Clifford to start or Drew Aller? Like, that's not...
Wow.
It's not, you know, how we expected it to play out that we're having those conversations, right? So one game, who you taking, Doug?
I think I root for the Meteor. Like, I don't know what you do. Which again, like, and it's hard to talk about this because it's, I like, you know, they're young men doing the best they can. I think it's like an indictment it's an indictment of Penn State's quarterback development, which is like, what's the common denominator on that? It's like James Franklin has not like developed quarterbacks to the next step. But I also have been thinking about this. I didn't have this down as a question. Bill, I'll ask you first, and Audrey, see what you think. Like, when Ohio State got some quarterback play that wasn't quite good enough, Ryan Day and Kyle McCord parted ways, and they didn't run that back for a second season. And James Franklin hung in with 4 years of starting for Sean Clifford and 3 years of starting for Drew Aller. Bill, do you think that, like, is there anything there? Could you have imagined, like, if Ryan Day was coaching Sean Clifford and Drew Aller, do you think they would have been the starters for as long as they were?
No shot. No, you can't. You can't let average quarterback play like sustain, right? Like, when you're trying to play for what Penn State and Ohio State are trying to play for, it's like, it's ruthless. But I think you have to be with that position, right? If you can't make that evaluation after a year or two that this guy's not good enough, then you're just bad at evaluating quarterback play. Ryan Day, you know, like, you ding him a little bit, right? Because they didn't develop Kyle McCord to be ready by the time he was in his 3rd year. But when it was apparent that he wasn't, they didn't let it fester. They just said, like, no, you're not going to be our starter. And they went in a different direction, and they won a national title. So you just have to be willing to swallow your pride and correct your mistakes. And I think Ohio State is pretty good at that. And James Franklin never really seemed to do it.
Like, ever a conversation, Audrey? Could you have ever imagined either James Franklin giving up on either Sean Clifford or Drew Aller, saying, like, thanks for the service, but no thanks, we're going to go get Fernando Mendoza kind of thing?
You know what? Now that you say this, Doug, I'm going to have to dive more into this in my 6-part series on how it all went wrong for Penn State, because this is absolutely one of the points. And I need to remember to hit on this, because it goes back to what I said earlier about James and that loyal to a fault. He would not do that. Like, these were his guys. He was going to ride it out with them. And in the end, that's what got him, because ultimately, I think you can also say, well, what does the ideal quarterback look like for this offense? Because they cycled through so many OCs that you look at Andy Kotelnicki and what they did at Kansas, and you say, well, Drew Aller is not a fit for that. Like, Bo Pribula would have been a better fit, but then you lose Bo to Missouri. And so I think that, but it goes even deeper than this. Like, this is not just a James Franklin couldn't develop quarterbacks problem. You know, Doug, the last time Penn State had a quarterback selected in the first round of the NFL draft?
I do know this because I use this stat 4,000 times because Kerry Collins was the last Big Ten quarterback selected in the first round until Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State was selected in the 2019 draft. So Kerry Collins in 1995, right? Like that. Not only is it a Penn State draft, it was like, oh, well, those days are over for the Big Ten, thank goodness, but they're not over for Penn State, which is the problem.
No, and that's the thing. It's like this was supposed to be your guy. Like Drew Aller was supposed to be the guy, and like this was your chance to stick it to Ohio State. Because I mean, they wanted him too. Like, wasn't that? I remember down at the end there was some like Ohio State. Like, are they going to try to flip him? Aren't they? Right? Am I remember that correctly?
Yeah, I think they were not super public about it, but they were making phone calls. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like you were able to hang on to your guy, and then you cycle through OCs. But no, that was part of the problem with Franklin, and I think it also speaks to this era with NIL. And James was this will be point 7 in my 6-part series. James was so hellbent on preserving the locker room dynamic that they had money that they could spend, and he didn't want to do it because it was a matter of like, I don't want to upset the guys in the room. And I think that again goes back to the quarterback situation. And, you know, we've gotten into some fan conspiracy theorists around here because what else do you do when you're covering a 3-win team in October? You know, some fans have said, well, what if, you know, Penn State maybe was hoping that Aller would have turned pro after last year, and they maybe would have had that conversation behind the scenes and would have said, hey, Bo Prabula, you stay here. This job's yours next year. Like, would that have, you know, had things change or turn out a little bit differently? I don't know, but it's at least an interesting discussion because you're saying, okay, like Prabula could give this offense some things that in the end, Aller just didn't have. I don't know. Is he maybe a 5th round selection in the draft? Like, I mean, that's the same round Sean Clifford went in because some crazy team called the Green Bay Packers thought it was a 5th round pick. And you know,
I mean, there's still, I mean, there's certainly been some Cleveland Browns, Drew Aller chatter, like bring the Northeast Ohio kid home. But
they were Brown season ticket holders, and he grew up liking Baker Mayfield, and he wore a headband back in the day. Yeah.
So like at some point like that, you know, a year ago, that was like a 1st round conversation. Like, what round conversation would that be now? They can add that to the pile of quarterbacks in Cleveland. Bill, who's the offensive guy for Ohio State you're going to have your eye on in this game?
I'll combine 2 people into one and just say the right side of the offensive line. Philip Daniels, a right tackle, and I guess it'll probably end up being 3 people because there's this question, right? Is Josh Padilla going to start at right guard or is Tigger Shabola going to start at right guard? I thought Ryan Day's answer to that question where he basically said, like, we like what Josh Padilla is doing in practice. We think he's played well in games. He's not been perfect. He has solidified himself as a top 6 offensive lineman, was basically him saying, we're still going to let Tigger start, but Josh Padilla is going to mix in. So you'll see both of them, and that'll be an ongoing thing. But it was a real problem, that right side, especially against Wisconsin. And as we talked about, you know, Penn State's maybe defensive talent has not played up to the level people were expecting it to, but they're still talented, right? So deny Dennis Sutton against Phil Daniels. Chaz Coleman playing the first of what may be many games in Ohio Stadium against Philip Daniels. Zane Durant on the inside, right? That's where I'll be watching, because that's just the thing that, like, even if this game ends up not really being competitive, which is certainly possible, that is a spot that Ohio State needs to keep working at, just sort of long term, if it wants to win a national title. So I think it's there. You have to look.
You know, Bill, I might tip my hand here a little bit. This could be a scouting report thing if Ryan Day is listening, if Matt Patricia is listening. Penn State did do this earlier this year, actually against Oregon. It was the first they've done it, and maybe they run it back in this game, where they'll take the Dennis Sutton and line him out pretty wide, and then drop Durant in next to him. So they will try to sometimes stack one side. Okay. So maybe that's what they try to do here.
Oh, so that could be a problem. That Chaz Coleman reference, obviously, to the true freshman from Ohio who's been lighting it up at defensive end for Penn State. Are Penn State fans freaked out about losing him in the transfer portal, Audrey?
Heck yes. I think that's the Jim Knowles gave Chaz Coleman the nickname this preseason. He called him the Chazmanian Devil. And I mean, nicknames. I was like, we're just trying to get to know this guy. And he's like, yes, the Chazmanian Devil. And we're like, what? Who? But then we quickly figured out who Jim Knowles was referring to. And I mean, the hype for Chaz Coleman was unlike really any I had heard in 15 seasons doing this for a defensive player in the preseason. Like they were all in on this guy. And James Franklin's telling us that he's special and he's built differently, that Franklin used to go through and have the players like rank themselves in terms of red light, yellow light, green light. And like green, you're going to burn your red shirt. And like, where do you think you are? And Franklin told the story that they're sitting there with the freshmen and, you know, they get the Chaz Coleman and Chaz is like, well, I think I'm a yellow. And everybody in the room is like, dude, what are you talking about? You're definitely a green. Like you're the most ready of all of us. But he just kind of wasn't like really sure about himself. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a guy that you have to try to work to keep, and it's going to be really hard. And sure, Penn State was able to edge out Ohio State once, but I mean, I will say too, like, does it maybe help Penn State where you say, okay, the next head coach, you're going to keep Jim Knowles. That's the preference as your DC. So what's Chaz's relationship like, Jim? Does that help? I don't know, but I think there's a guy with some Penn State ties that I'm sure would love to get his hands on a young Chaz Coleman. Mr. Larry Johnson, right?
Larry Johnson was.
Yeah. Okay. Audrey, Penn State defensive player that you'll have an eyeball on in this game.
Cornerback AJ Harris. Back in the preseason, back when we thought this was a top 5 matchup, I was intrigued by Harris and thought that, you know, this is a guy who was a highly coveted prospect, started his college career at Georgia, then comes to Penn State, wasn't tested in non-conference play, and then got benched after getting burnt on a touchdown against Northwestern. I still think there's a lot of upside there, but again, these receivers can make DBs look absolutely silly. I do think collectively Penn State has a good secondary, but this is a chance for AJ Harris to show a little bit maybe what he can do, but tall order for sure. Yeah,
he was really an important part last year. Right, he and Jalen Kimber at corner, like 2 transfers came in, that really mattered, and that's just super surprising to think. I mean, again, Ohio State's kind of been through this at times. Like Denzel Burke had some struggles after being a really good cornerback for Ohio State, but Bill, like he never got benched after giving up a touchdown. Like that's kind of like you hear that about how good AJ Harris has been and can be, and you hear that, and it's just a little shocking, you know.
It's gonna be a really tough thing to bounce back from too. Yeah, I was actually surprised to see that. Like, I know it was like a bad play, but he's such an important player.
And it was also one of those things too, where like because it happened and we didn't know, and we're like, oh, is he hurt? And Terry was like, no, we pulled him. And like, obviously, you know, they played him against Iowa and he was fine. We really don't have to worry about the Iowa passing attack much. So it's a different situation.
Yeah. Okay. Landis, defensive player for the Buckeyes to watch on Saturday.
I think I'm looking at Eddrick Houston in this game. He did not
a roller coaster that is your relationship with Eddrick.
Yeah. I'm just really hoping my preseason prediction about him ends up looking good. So we'll see. Obviously he's been banged up for most of the year. Didn't play against Illinois. I thought the last week, the last game against Wisconsin, he started to play pretty well. I thought he played really well against Minnesota and like had to leave that game early. So you're right. I have a predisposition toward him, toward wanting him to be good, but I really do feel like he could be starting to figure it out a little bit. And you know, Vengo Awane on Penn State's offensive line, I think he's back, right? Audrey, he's going to play this week.
Yep.
Yeah, he's like maybe the best guard in the country. So that's a heck of a matchup for Eddrick and anyone on Ohio State's defensive line who comes up matched up against him. So. Tywone Malone, who's played a lot sort of in the place of Houston or, you know, in tandem with him, I think has played pretty well, but Houston still has a higher ceiling. And like, if he actually is starting to figure it out, like halfway through his sophomore year, which would not be unheard of, that'd be a heck of a thing for Ohio State's defensive line as it looks to bolster the tackle position a little bit. So just looking to see if it does really feel like he's starting to build some momentum at that spot.
Okay. Audrey Snyder, you're on Substack. You're with the Nittany Dispatch in the podcast and YouTube world, but just make sure the folks can find your great Penn State coverage.
Yep. The Substack is Inside the Lions, so insidethelions.substack.com. And like Doug so eloquently put it, the podcast is the Nittany Dispatch. We're twice a week because we can't all just be, you know, nonstop yappers like some shows. I mean, some shows really can they can go to town. We're more of a twice a week operation, but a little more during the coaching search as needed. We don't have as much juice on the Nittany Dispatch, but we try our hardest. But yeah, the written work is on Inside the Lions.
I think
No rebuttal.
nonstop yapper is perhaps the best description of me that I've ever heard. So I would do 11 shows a week if Landis let me, but Landis is like, we should write. People think writing is good. And I'm like, why would you write it when you can say it? Audrey, great coverage. We would recommend anybody who cares about Penn State. And even like if you're an Ohio State fan or a college football fan, and you normally maybe are not that interested in the day in and day out workings of Penn State football, like you are now, this is super interesting to see a program like this. It's a lens through which to view all of college football. The number one story in college football this year, partly because everybody seems bored with Ohio State being the number one team in the country, is this coaching carousel and how many high profile people have been fired when you have 3 of the top 15 teams from the preseason firing their coaches. It's some indication of where we are in the sport. I don't think it's the sport is on fire the way some people think. I think there's just some instances of some good programs having high expectations that they're falling short of. So you fire a guy and you can always find the money. I don't know that has changed that much, but Penn State's super interesting right now. So subscribe to Audrey's Substack and like get all the ins and outs of this, Audrey, because it's a Penn State story, but it is a college football story when a program like this is making a move like this.
Yeah, and when I covered all of my 12-part series on where it all went wrong for the 2025 Nittany Lions, we'll outline it all because no, you're right, Doug. I mean, this is, and so many people, as you know, the firing came down the stretch, they're like, well, they're not going to do it because of the money. And I was like, guys, there's mitigation in the contract. Like Penn State is going to probably end up not paying much money to James Franklin because he's going to coach somewhere. Like that's the other side of this. He's going to coach somewhere else. And it's like, okay, you owed him $8 million a year. If school X pays him $6 million a year, you owe him $2 million, right? Like, right. And if you end up keeping Jim Knowles, like, so you're going to eat some money on the OC and the position coach contracts, but it's the name of the game of the sport right now. Between the portal, you can flip a roster quickly. I mean, Penn State's probably going to have a whole new roster, so that's part of what you can get over at Inside the Lions. New coach, new roster, and coverage of all of it.
Audrey Snyder, she's as good as it gets. Thanks so much for taking time out of your week to talk to us about Penn State versus Ohio State. Bill and I will both be at that game on Saturday. We will have a post-game show. We will have our picks on Thursday for this Ohio State-Penn State game. We'll have our national picks on Friday. All of that here on YouTube. Like, subscribe, tell a friend. For now, thanks to Audrey. On behalf of Bill, I'm Doug, and that was the Bill and Doug Show.